it's much more obvious now that the United States is completely lost. Like, we've been used to leading for so long, and we've kind of stopped leading, and there is that sense of decline. And so I think people are, instead of trying to think of some new way of doing better, they're just kind of reaching back to the old comfortable
Past.
thing, yeah, which is find a new leader who's just going to make everything better again. Again, it's a messiah complex. We're just looking for somebody to save us. And I think we have to find that new way, right? We have to find what's the next thing that's going to make everybody have a better life.
Welcome to another episode of the Bloomburg Democrat. I am Sally Taylor. This is my, and we just discussed it, favorite brother, John
Hey.
Daniels. You got to have favorites every now and then.
Yeah, that's right.
Uh, but no offense to my other two brothers at all.
I'm just the
Today,
most interactive,
you are the most interactive.
which is
Yes, you, at least
it's a
currently.
weird thing to say because I'm not an interactive person at all. Like, I just
Right.
saw somebody on the street who I kind of know. We've met several times now, and we Luna and I saw him earlier today, and she's like, "Oh," and I'm like, "Who? Oh, it's Francisco." And then I saw him again on the way home from picking up some food for dinner and talked a little bit. So,
Yeah, well, we've got a lot of introversion in our family, so we're not great about interacting
yeah,
as it
yeah,
is.
yeah.
But
I'm I'm comfortable with that.
me too. And I'm very excited though to be spending this weekly time with you because it's not
And me
something we've
too.
ever really done. So
No, it's not. Because again, I'm not a very interactive person. It's all right.
I've been accused of that as well.
Yeah.
But today we wanted to talk about whether or not this is a serious topic. The United States is kind of devolving into fascism. And I think there are some really good arguments that that might well be the case. But first, I guess the first thing we need to do is define fascism.
Yeah.
So, for you, John, what
Mm.
is that? What does that mean when a country starts to become very fascist in nature?
Well, so I asked myself the same question, and I was thinking about it, did a little bit of reading on it. And for me, I think it's kind of like corporal fascism in general. So, well, it's a really difficult topic because political ideology in general is very much subjective. It depends on who you talk to, and their opinion is different. And so for me, I find that if you go too far, I mean, you can say it too far. If you just go really, really, really to the extreme left, for me, this is left, or to the right, then you tend to kind of like loop back around. And I've seen that other people have also kind of come to this conclusion as well because their charts that they draw are circles, right? And so, but other people that like to draw like the double axis thing, and then they put people in the four corners, stuff like that. But fascism for me basically is an authoritarian, conservative, and but I think we really need to define these words that we use because different people will define them differently, and the meaning is very fuzzy. And so for me, conservative liberal, I think is kind of just economic, mostly, not completely. Wait a second, because then we also
Keep
have
going.
we have like the conservative and liberal, and it's typically on this axis, the x-axis. And you have your, again, this is left for me. You have your liberal people, and so they want to spend everybody's money uh, for everybody's good. And you have people over here, and everybody wants to spend their money for their own good, right? And maybe both things are okay. It could work out all right if everybody's making more or less the same amount of money. But when people aren't, then it tends to get topsy-turvy. And so then I tend to lean that way, more liberal. And then you have your like your leadership roles, right? Do you want a lot of people leading? And then it tends to go like that way down. And this is considered like democracy.
True
And then
democracy. Yeah.
yeah. And then your up direction tends to be authoritarianism, where you have your dictators or your really strong political leaders who kind of want to make all the rules. And like this is the kind of the general political spectrum. And like I said, some people think it's more like circular, and I think of it a little bit more 360, 3D, and like you go around and you kind of back around. Fascism, I think, tends to go authoritarian and conservative economically, right? And of course, there are like social aspects of excuse me, of things that tend to be associated with conservatism. But I think that's really just it's the mindset of the United States, right? And so if you get out in the world and you look around, you'll see there's a whole lot of ideas that maybe you hadn't considered before, and they're not just on this two axis type of a thing. Like they do kind of really go diagonal ways, and like and sometimes you have people who go this way, but then there's a big chunk of their ideology over here. And I'm not a centrist, I don't think, but I kind of have I'm like in the middle area, and some people consider that a centrist, but I don't think it's a centrist because there's a lot of things over here and over here that I don't agree with, and so a lot of
Yeah.
it's a mess.
Well, and human beings are complex individuals, and on an individual basis, no two are going to be identical
Yeah.
in their philosophies, in their ways of living, all of that. And I agree with you. But
Yeah.
there is a well-established definition for fascism
Okay. Well,
historically.
according to someone, let's hear it.
Okay, well, so i'm gonna
Because
i'm gonna bring up
I've read up,
10.
and like there's a lot of people who disagree or they have
Right,
similar
okay.
ideas, but they're not
Well,
exactly the same.
well, let's look at. I mean, so well, I guess let's start with somebody who we would call a known fascist from history.
Okay.
Okay, who would you have somebody in mind that you would say this guy's definitely fascist? Anybody that you would categorize that way?
Um, I mean, yeah, but then again, I don't know. Maybe.
Okay, well, we got to come to some agreement on terms in some way or
Okay.
another,
I
right?
guess. Well, okay. So I'm looking at Wikipedia here on my other screen here, and there's a picture that says uh, Benito Mussolini, dictator of fascist Italy, and Adolf Hitler, dictator of Nazi Germany, were fascist leaders.
There you go. they're
Okay.
they're the most obvious. They're the most obvious ones if we're going to pull out. Although I'm certain
Yeah.
there have been a lot more. We've had a
Oh
lot
yes. Oh
of
yes.
authoritarian dictator type individuals, right?
Oh yes.
But
Okay.
I pulled up 10 bullet points for
Yeah.
fascism.
Let's
Okay.
hear it,
And so I'm going to just give them off real quick because I don't want to spend a
please.
huge amount of time on this.
Yeah. But we got
Uh,
to define, I think.
we need to define something
Yeah,
we can agree upon, right?
exactly.
So
So like
ultra
you don't have
national.
to agree on it, but just understand that that's where we're coming from, right?
That's where we're going to come from, or at least
That's right.
me and John
Yes,
can agree or
exactly. And you
disagree.
and I have my ideas and you have yours, and
Right,
that's fine.
right, right. So, and this is not my list. It's a list that I looked up when I was looking up definitions of fascism. Okay.
Yeah.
So, number one, ultranationalism. So
Yeah.
this nationalistic ideology, national superiority, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Call to a glorified past, that sort of ultranationalism.
Mhm.
Authoritarianism. So concentration of power in a single leader or party with little tolerance for dissent, suppression of political opposition, that sort of thing. Cult of personality. The leader presents themselves as the sole savior of the Union.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the
Yeah.
propaganda around that leader supports them as being infallible and indispensable.
Right. Kind of 1984 there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Mil-
that's a good example, right? 1984.
the
Everybody
book
should read that.
1984.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And there's a reason that book came out when it did as well.
Yeah.
Um, the militarization of society.
Mhm.
So, glorification of the military, use of force to maintain order, expansionist rhetoric, or policies to assert dominance. Then, number 5 is suppression of dissent. So, control of the media, dissemination of propaganda, crackdowns on
Political
free speech.
prisoners.
Yes, political opponents, exactly, civil liberties, that sort of thing. And then what you were largely speaking to, economic corporatism,
Mhm.
right? And so the alignment between the state and major industries,
Yeah.
okay, that serve national interest,
Mhm.
control or influence over economic sectors while maintaining the facade of capitalism. Number 7 is populist rhetoric, appeals to the frustrations of the masses by blaming societal problems on minorities, elites, or outsiders.
Yeah.
Use of
So
simple, emotionally charged language
if I
to
can real quick,
rally. Mhm.
populism is it's not necessarily a bad thing, I don't think.
No, I don't think it is. But if you're looking at ways of convincing the broader public, populism is a tactic
Right, right. I mean,
used by
it's
lots of people, but also by fascist
well,
authoritarian leaders.
populism is kind of the description of trying to appeal to the masses, right?
Yes, but what are you using to do that? And it's different with fascism, say, than by
Yes,
more liberal versions of that same populism. They
right.
use very
So
different tactics.
exactly. So I think we have a lot of overlap here. Like
Sure,
populism is kind of maybe it's an aspect of one thing, but it's going to be an aspect of a lot of things.
it will. It will. Well,
Yeah,
because you need the masses to support you, or you're not in control,
of
right?
course. I mean, why would you be?
But with the populist
Yeah.
rhetoric, it's more about blaming the other
Hmm.
with regard to fascism.
Right.
Okay. So
Okay.
blaming minorities, blaming people that don't have power, or
Mhm.
on the opposite side of that, blaming the elites.
Yes.
And then who do you describe as being the
Yes. Yes. Yes.
elites?
Yes. Yes.
Right. So
Yes.
that was number 7. We
Mhm.
got a couple, 3 more.
Keep going. Keep
Uh,
going.
manipulation of elections and institutions.
Mhm.
The erosion of democratic processes to maintain power, use of legal mechanisms to undermine checks and balances.
Mhm.
And then number 9, anti-intellectualism,
Mhm. Well,
dismissal of
that's basically
experts.
elitism, anti-elitism, essentially is the same.
Yes, but intellectualism, you can have elites that are just wealthy but not necessarily intellectual, and then
That's
you can
right.
have elites that are, the elites within any given grouping of people. So the
Right.
elites within education and science and
Yes, and
that
you can
kind of
have
thing.
intellectuals who are not considered elite.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. But the dismissal of those, the academics, critical thinkers, threats to
Mhm.
national unity. So those who might break down your populist, appeal.
Right.
And then the promotion of conspiracy theories and disinformation. That's part of anti-intellectualism. And then finally, uniformity and control. So the enforcement of cultural or ideological conformity, the use
Mhm.
of symbols, slogans, and rituals to reinforce a collective identity. So
Yeah.
those are, I mean, I know that's a kind of a long list
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
it means to be a fascist or to have fascist,
Right.
fascist
And
political
I would
system
say you don't have to have all those traits and you could still be a fascist.
and still be a fascist, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It depends on how good you are at what you're doing.
Right. How hard are you trying?
Right,
Right.
exactly.
Do you want to be a fascist even? Like,
Right.
or are you just accidentally a fascist?
Right.
Right.
So the question is does the political movement within the United States align with that list that I just read?
Mm.
What do you think, John?
I think it has for a very long time. Democracy in the United States has never been a true democracy. Like
Well, no.
we have it's often been called republic, right?
Right.
We have the electoral college, which is the electoral college is just like the absolute. Yes, we have democracy, but it ends here. And then as long as everybody kind of agrees with democracy, it continues. But if it doesn't, then whatever is going to
Right.
happen. So,
Right.
and then the
Well,
fact
and
that we're a federal government in the United States, like it's a federation of states. I've heard people claim very strongly that each individual state is its own kind of state as a national government country type state, as opposed to just like a group of places that are part of a union. I don't know. I don't think the United States has ever really been a good example of democracy in my own opinion. I think it's kind of always leaned fascist to some degree. Probably less
well,
at certain points in history, right? Don't get me wrong.
yeah,
A lot less in certain points of history, but there's always been this idea that the general man is incapable of taking care of himself. And we have done a really great job of reinforcing that idea by our actions, right? We've proven ourselves to be incapable of taking care of ourselves time and time again. And so it's no wonder, I would say, that I find the United States to be a fascist society, because we always are looking for, I think Christianity has a lot to do with this. We're always looking for that Messiah. We're looking for the Superman who's going to come and save us, because Superman was just a Jesus character, right? And we're
right.
looking for the person to come and save us from the bad guys, to save us from ourselves. And we never really want to just take responsibility for our own thoughts, actions, whatever. So I don't know. I think democracy is a wonderful thing, and I think a lot of places get closer to doing it right than we do in the United States. I think we pretend to be a democracy more than anything, and I think it has mostly been an authoritarian kind of a thing. I mean, like, I think a lot of people disagree with me on this, like, but deep down, right, when we really analyze the United States and we look at the political spectrum, which is, wow, so many colors of political ideology, the United States has always kind of, the president is the leader, right?
He has always had checks and balances built into the system, which do
Yeah.
seem to
Mm.
be collapsing a bit.
Well, I would say the checks and balances system of the United States. I learned
That
about
never
this.
worked.
Yeah, it never worked well. I've learned about this in government classes in school in the United States, and I've heard the propaganda. I've drunk the Kool-Aid. I thought things were hunky-dory, but they're just not. Like we have the judicial branch is a bunch of really old people who have been old their entire lives, I feel, and they're in power until the day they die, or unless they just really decide that, "Well, I'm tired of this and I'm not going to do anymore." But who does that? Because apparently there's a lot of good perks. So the judicial branch has been a joke for forever. Like, I'm completely not surprised that there's very, very low public opinion of the judicial branch at this point.
Yeah.
The executive branch also has just been authoritarianism pretty much across the board. And we see this more now, I think. Like, I feel like it's kind of always been that way as I reflect and kind of look at the past in the scope of today. But like Biden pardoning his whole family, I get it. I get it. It was kind of like a preemptive Trump, don't attack
Yeah.
me and don't attack those that I love kind of a thing.
Right.
But what
Well,
a
and he did it
terrible
not only
example.
well, and he did it not only for his family, but for all of the people on these like enemies list that have
Yeah.
been going around from, the Republican side.
Okay.
So
Okay. So, you know
yeah,
what? Hey, if you want to
having to do
really,
preemptive,
yes, yes. But
it's
okay.
scary.
Yes, I agree that it is. However, he could have pardoned everyone. He, we have the census. We have the names of everybody. We
Yeah.
can very easily say everybody's pardoned, right? Let's do that.
Let's start from scratch.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to talk about was, what are the conditions, if we can agree, and
Mm,
I think you did agree with me, John. You can correct me if I'm wrong, that
okay.
we've got strong examples of being very much fascist in our current
Yes.
ways of operating. And, you know, there's a lot of accusations going around about that. But what are the conditions that lead to it? That to me is an
Mm,
important question,
yeah.
because, you know, if you don't like fascism, how did
Right.
you get there? And what have you got to do to change it?
Oh, yeah. Well,
So,
changing it, I don't know. So far, the examples have been war, right?
right, which is not the direction I would like to go
No, no,
either.
no. I don't want to go that direction either. I have
Yeah,
a daughter who I don't want to die.
right,
So
exactly.
yeah, I'm not in the favor of war at all.
Right.
But then it's really, really hard because we got to think of something new.
Yeah.
Because so far, this is how we've dealt with fascism. And,
Right, right.
and when
Uh,
you're the superpower and you're fighting against it, then it's less terrible. But when you're the superpower and you're succumbing to it, it's going to be hard for everybody.
so let me talk a little bit about the things historically
Yeah.
that have been, you know, looked at as leading to the rise of fascist leadership within countries. Here's a list of about, yet again, 10 things that tend to
Okay.
lead to fascism.
Yeah.
Economic hardship and inequality.
Yeah.
Okay. So widespread poverty, unemployment, high inflation, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Economic disparity.
Mhm.
We are at the greatest economic disparity right now in our country that has ever existed.
Okay.
So that is kind of an issue.
Mhm.
Political instability and weak democratic institutions.
Mhm.
So corruption, inefficiency, gridlock. We've kind of experienced all of that.
Yeah.
Frequent changes in leadership or coups, erosion of checks and balances. So we kind of hit on that one just a little. National humiliation or crisis, or at the
Mhm.
very least, a perception of national humiliation or crisis, right? So, perception of the loss of prestige or a wounded national pride, that kind of
Okay.
thing,
Yeah.
right? Fear and scapegoating.
Mhm.
So, and I would claim that's a tool actually used by
Right. Right. Right.
authoritarians to, but it once it takes hold in the
Right.
general public, it becomes the
Right.
thing that leads to support of those authoritarians, right?
Of course. Yes.
So that's that concept
It's
of blaming
this is
the other.
basically identity politics.
Yes,
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 and
yes.
fascism, if I may say, can go both ways, right?
It
There's
can.
there's fascists to the left and there's fascists to the right.
Yes, correct. I
Yeah.
agree with that completely. I do. And then a weak or complicit opposition. And
Mm.
I'm going to say that
I disagree with that. I don't think that it leads to it, that it doesn't
well,
stifle it,
that well,
perhaps.
maybe that it doesn't stifle it. So
Yeah,
it's basically a lack of opposition in reality.
you're
And
right.
so I lead this to say the media not saying, "Hey, we might have a problem here." Instead, business as usual,
Oh
right?
yes,
We're going to
yes,
get along with
yes,
everybody. We're just
yes.
going to pretend everything's okay. That kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Well, this is also what the Democrats have been doing for a very long time. Like they're not very strong with
Mhm.
their opinions. Like
Yeah.
they tend to just want to make everybody happy, and then nobody's
Yes.
happy.
Yeah. I would
Yeah,
agree with that. I agree
yeah.
with you on that. And but then, well, and this then
But
leads
you're
into
right
the
with
media.
the no, you're right with the media though, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
And this next step actually specifically addresses the media. It says media manipulation and disinformation.
Yeah,
And of course, our very first episode, I think, was on, are we in a post-truth world?
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Because disinformation seems to be everywhere.
Yeah.
And certainly the manipulation of the media. Cultural and social divisions. So we're back into that identity politics issue.
Hmm. Hmm.
So pre-existing racial, ethnic, class divisions, resentment. And fascists often present themselves as defenders of traditional values. That's why it
Yeah.
leans conservative, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
they pick up more conservative people, is because they're after traditional values, people who don't like change, right?
Right.
That's
Right.
people who hang on
And
to
so,
tradition.
yes, so we have a very specific idea of what this means in the United States, but in other places, the idea of being conservative is maybe very different, right? If you have a very traditionally equality-based society, then conservatism might just be like, let's maintain that very equality-based society and not make it uh, haves and have nots or whatever, right?
Right, right,
So yes, we have to. Ugh, it's tricky, I think, to especially to see outside of what you know, right? It's really hard.
hmm
But I think it's important to try to keep in mind, especially these very difficult topics, you kind of have to really try to keep in mind other people might see this differently, right?
right,
What's conservative to me may not be conservative to other people. And these labels are very fluid. Like there's a lot of characteristics that can fit under a lot of different labels, and
right.
they can cross-pollinate, so to speak, right? Like you might share this person is fascist because they're like this, but this person is a fascist because they're completely the opposite.
Right.
And so,
Well, but I do think you have to take all
mm,
these things, even though you can leave out one or two and still be fascist. You can't
yeah,
leave out half of them. You can't leave out the vast majority of these list
it makes you
items.
something else, right?
Yes, then you're not
Exactly.
fascist. You are something else.
Yes.
So,
We
yeah,
have definitions that we try to apply to words, but yeah, you're right.
yeah. And then, so I'll do the last real quickly. There's just the militarization of society, a culture that glorifies the military. But these are sort of some of the same ones that are identifiers of fascism, right? A charismatic leadership with populist appeal, and then general global trends and influences, meaning that it tends to be a little bit contagious from
Mhm.
one nation to another.
Especially if you're
So those are,
conquering your neighbors.
yes, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
So let
Exactly.
me ask a question real quick. Like, forget the United States for a moment.
Yeah.
What other countries in the world might you point your finger at and say, maybe a fascist country, right? Like,
Yeah.
because you might feel more conservative about saying my own country is a fascist country than you would about like those guys over there. That's just human
Right.
nature. So let's try to relax a little bit, embrace our
Right.
human side and say like these people might be fascist, and let's see
Well,
like
and
how we compare.
what countries are kind of fitting into some of these others? And I hate to say this, the way I kind of determine, because Americans are horrible, and I can be guilty of this. Americans are horrible of knowing what's going on in their own country but not knowing what's going on in the rest of the world,
Yeah,
right? And so I'm
yeah,
trying to be better about that. So for me, I look at who our current now president identifies with.
uh-huh.
Like, who
Okay.
does he uphold? And
So
they're
you
generally the
label him a
strong men.
fascist. So you're trying to
I
say
have,
guilt
because
by
for me,
association.
he ticks every single
No,
box,
I do agree with
John.
you. I think
Every
Trump is probably a
box.
fascist. Yes,
I mean,
I agree.
deeply so.
Yeah,
So I look at people like Viktor Orban and
yeah,
Vladimir Putin and,
yeah,
some of these other people who are strong men, authoritarian leaders who control their countries in the ways that you go down the list and you go, check, 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 check,
yeah,
check. They do all of that. And I will tell you, I'm very confident and comfortable in saying that Trump is fascist,
yeah,
because the people who worked most closely with him
yeah.
and
Have
then
said so.
said, oh my gosh, this guy's a fascist.
Yes,
And they were military, leaders, and they were
right.
the people that were closest to him. that
Yeah.
said he is not fit for this job. He has
Yeah.
extreme fascist tendencies,
Yeah.
and they would no longer even work with him or vote for him. So
Yeah.
if the
Yeah.
people that are closest to him can say, yep, he fits all the hallmarks,
Yeah.
maybe we ought to pay a little bit of attention, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So that's why I have very deep concerns. I go down this list, and I'm like, this list is us in the United States. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, it's not all of us. It's truly
Right.
not all of us
No,
because
of course
he
not.
doesn't truly have full support in the nation.
All
Obviously,
right.
there's a lot
All
of
right.
people working very vehemently against his actions and his policies.
All right.
But he has a broad enough support that he's back.
Yes, I personally, if I was to look into the world and think like what countries might be fascist, like it's a bit of a broad spectrum. I think it's not just what we would consider to be conservative or liberal. Like there's some on both sides, right? Like
Right.
China is basically the United States. I have no desire to go back to the United States. Been there, done that. I've never even been to China, but I just don't want to go because everything that I know from people who I talk to who are from China or reading the news, it seems so much like the United States, even though they're supposed to be very communist or socialist,
Right.
right?
Right.
They're supposed to be very equality based and stuff, but they're just really not. Like the Uyghurs aren't being treated fairly, not equally, right?
Mm-hmm.
It seems very fascist to me in China. And I think the United States is, again, guilty by association in this point. Like, the United States is a very fascist type place, or at least at the very, very least, a very plutocracy type of a place, right? It's if it all depends on who you know and friends and family first. And that's, I don't know, is that so bad to take care of your friends and family? I would say no, it's not bad to take care of your friends and family, but come on, what about
Do
everybody
you do
else?
it to the detriment of your neighbors as well, though?
Exactly,
Can you not
exactly.
take care of your friends and family and take care of your neighbors?
Wouldn't that be best?
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Right? Yeah. If everybody had great opportunities and nice health care
Yeah.
and freedoms and can
Yeah.
do whatever they want, that
Yeah.
sounds wonderful to me. So I don't know. I feel like I'm a real democratic type of person, but I feel like maybe a lot of people are not. And maybe they think they are, but I think you're just fooling yourself with a label. Like you need to start thinking about what words mean and what does it mean to be democratic or one thing I find to be a little bit crazy is that the libertarians tend to caucus with the conservatives.
Hmm.
But the libertarians really don't care about the identity politics in general. Otherwise, you're not really libertarian. Maybe
Right.
you're
Correct.
fooling yourself and telling yourself you're libertarian, but you're not really. But there are a lot of libertarians that tend to caucus with the conservatives. And I think it's economic primarily.
I think it is.
Yeah. And
Yes.
I think we need to figure out how to separate economics from leadership because I
Mhm.
think that's the point that things start to get really weird, I think.
In my mind, that's unrigging the system again from the oligarchic influence that we now have.
Right.
We have never had a president inaugurated with a stack of tech bros, billionaires
Right.
sitting behind him for the
Yeah, no.
inauguration.
Yeah. Well,
That's kind of
but
scary.
have we had the equivalent though? Because I really don't know. Have we had the
I don't
equivalent?
think so.
Like tech bros are a new thing, but
Well,
did
they
we
are,
have
but they
did
are
we have
billionaires.
yes,
Did
yes,
we
yes.
have Carnegie and
Exactly. And what's
the
the other guy?
those my brain's
The
not working.
railroad guy.
I wanted to say the Roth. Well, he was Carnegie was
Rockefeller.
railroad.
Rockefeller.
Rockefeller. Thank you. I kept wanting to say Rothschilds, and that's Great
Uh,
Britain, I believe.
well,
But anyway,
slowly get your fingers
yeah,
around it.
I don't know if those guys ever sat behind the presidents for the inauguration or not.
Yeah, I don't know.
I
I don't
mean,
know
they've
either.
always had their hand in the
I
politics for
bet they
sure.
probably did. I bet they probably did.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thus, my opinion that the United States has probably been fascist for a very long time, right?
Or at the very least, oligarchic.
Yes, yes.
Right. I mean, it has always
Those
been the
two
haves
things
that
are
has
very
ruled.
similar. Yeah,
They are similar, but
yeah,
not identical.
Well, the
you know,
populism, I guess, is the major dividing point
the
there.
populism is the big thing with that. And
Yeah.
there have been fascists that have risen from, the population, right?
Yes.
I mean, Hitler
Yes.
was that. He was
Right.
not necessarily ever among the wealthiest of the wealthy when he came into
Right.
power.
Right.
Um, but he had that magnetism that
Yeah.
drew the population in.
Yeah.
And so I guess my real question here is, John, is there things to be concerned about with this shifting trend towards authoritarianism, towards fascism? Because for me,
Mm.
it's a clearly evidential
Yeah, no,
that
I agree. It's
we're
it's
headed that
much
way.
more it's much more obvious now that the United States is completely lost. Like we've been used to leading for so long, and we've kind of stopped leading, and there is that sense of decline. And so I think people are, instead of trying to think of some new way of doing better, they're just kind of reaching back to the old comfortable
Past.
thing, yeah, which is find a new leader who's just going to make everything better again. Again, it's a messiah complex. We're just looking for somebody to save us. And I think we have to find that new way, right? We have to find what's the next thing that's going to make everybody have a better life. The way things are going right now, it's just not really good enough. The human condition, or the fact that we are biological creatures coming from other animal groups, is making it hard for us to rise above our animal instincts, I think. But that's what we need to do. We need to figure out how to be more than just natural creatures.
Yeah,
That's a big thing to have to do.
it is. I have deep concerns, though, that I see history repeating itself.
Oh
And a
yes.
lot of
Oh
people are saying,
yes.
oh, no, it's not. No, it's not. We're not that bad. But the lead up to the Holocaust
Yeah.
was by, slow nicks
Yeah.
until suddenly they were rounding people up.
Yeah.
And the ICE roundups have already started here in the United States. A lot of times they're doing their roundups where people work,
Uh-huh.
right? So
Well, I
even though
have
they're
heard
claiming they're
that.
going after the criminals, as far as the violent criminals, the
Right.
drug dealers and that sort of thing, they're going first to the most easy places to
Yeah.
find
Churches,
hardworking people.
schools.
Yeah. See,
Yeah.
that's so scary about schools.
Yeah.
I don't know if that has occurred yet. I haven't seen a reporting of that, but
Yeah.
definitely at people's places of work. And they're even, of course, picking up people that are citizens because they're brown.
Yeah.
And so there was a report just a day or two ago of a Puerto Rican Marine who was at work, who got
Uh-huh.
picked up with a bunch of other people and said, show us your documents, show us you're allowed to be here. And that's illegal. That's in the Constitution. That's
Yes.
illegal search and
Yes.
seizure. And it
Yes.
started already. And
Yeah.
it's, of course, they're not rounding up white people.
Right. Of course. Of course. They're just presumed to be there. But
Right.
the people who shot the border patrol guard in, where was it, Vermont, I believe, they were white,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know exactly where they're from, but their names sounded very Eastern European, maybe East West, but
I would
they
have to
just
look that one up because I
they're
don't I
white
don't
people.
haven't come across that one, but I will look it up for sure.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
We will definitely readdress that one if we need to at some point.
okay.
Um, so anyway, we're starting to see similar activity.
Oh yes,
They're
yes.
pulling down. We have a cousin who was talking about, I think she works for the NIH, I think, and her daughter is also doing similar research for one of the other organizations, the CDC or something, but they've been completely shut down. All their work has stopped. They've been told not to communicate with the public. All research, you know, um, assessments have been ended.
Yeah,
And, so the anti-intellectualism is chomping down hard.
yeah,
And this in a time when we've got a rash of bird flu and the
yeah,
CDC can't communicate with the public about it.
yeah. Well,
These
So
things are concerning.
yes, and so we've already said, I believe, that it's going to take some kind of a big, really catastrophic administration for people to kind of wake up and
Yeah.
say, what are we doing? And it's really seems like they're trying their best to become that administration.
Right. Well, and I kind of hope that's the way it's going to go, that this will be so bad in so many ways
Yeah.
that we don't have to have a revolution, that people
Yeah.
just go,
Oh, I
holy
hope so
crap,
too.
what have we been doing?
Yeah, I hope so too.
Let's reverse what we just got ourselves into.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm
That's
I'm
that's
not
really my hope.
I'm not really confident, but I am hopeful.
Well, I'm not confident because of what I've seen in history.
Yeah.
And history
No,
has
no,
not yet
exactly.
seemed to
And
work out
we
that way.
and we are the same people as the people in history. Like we think we've come a long
Right.
ways, but really most of us
Yeah.
are just like we're just entertaining ourselves in a different manner. But
Right.
basically we're the
Right.
same people.
Or even distracting ourselves.
Yeah.
We have so much to distract us now. And and I know a lot of people for their own sanity have had to turn away from everything that's going on
That's more or
because
less what I've done.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's going on for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, I took the extra
I
mile and I left the country because
Right.
I
But
don't have
you're
anything
willing
to
to
do with
get
it
on and
anymore.
have this conversation with me, John,
Oh
which
yeah,
is
sure.
more
I
than
mean,
some people even are
talk
willing
is
to do
cheap.
right now. Well, true, and ours is free.
Exactly. And I
But
recommend everybody take ad blocking software. So like
yeah.
I'm sorry that that would definitely reduce the amount of money that we would
Yeah.
possibly make from this. But I'm not
But
into
the
this
worst the
by any means.
worst parts of what got us into World War II
Yeah.
were from good people saying, I it doesn't affect me. I
Yeah.
don't want to look at that. It's not me, it's
Yeah.
impacting, so I'm not going to watch
Yeah.
or pay attention or say that this is wrong.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, so yes, it's time to start saying that right now,
yeah,
really, while it's early. Um,
yes.
we need
And
to
I think
start
there's a lot of
becoming,
people.
I think we need to start becoming the Underground Railroad, right? If you've got neighbors who are perhaps not 100% in the country legally, you should maybe start thinking about like a plan. How can you help
Right,
these people out
right.
if if you really think that they're worth helping out,
Yeah.
right?
And, and I don't know how much you remember from our childhood, John, not to get my family in any trouble.
Well, I remember a little
But
bit, yes.
yeah, so we
Jose, is
had a
that what we're
family.
talking about?
Yes, we
Yes.
had a family from Mexico, a whole family
Yeah.
that our family took under their wing.
Yeah.
Mostly, our father and mother, and gave them jobs and helped them with health issues and helped them
Yeah.
with, educational issues and even helped their family back in Mexico.
Yeah.
And to me, they were the example of how we treat people no matter who they are and where they're from.
Yeah, I agree.
And I just want to see
They
our
were wonderful people,
nation.
weren't they?
They were great, wonderful, kind people.
Yeah.
I remember uh, when I fell off the horse, and the
Uh-huh.
father of this family was working for our dad at the time, and he had some of his own horses, and I was crying. And
Hmm.
he picked me up. Oh my gosh, this is gonna make me cry thinking about it. He picked me up, he held me, he gave
Hmm.
me sugar cubes that we had there for the horses to kind of help,
Hmm.
settle me down.
Hmm.
And I was so grateful to
Yeah.
have this other, kind man in my life that was
Yeah.
there looking out for me.
Yeah.
And why can we not do that for each other?
Yeah.
You know,
It's a
that's
mystery.
the way the world should be.
We've gotten to be so selfish and
Yeah.
self-centered, and it's me, me,
Yeah.
me, and gotta get mine. And yeah, it's weird. It's sad.
So I'm sorry to get emotional.
It's quite
It
all
was
right.
just a really sweet memory. It's like I suddenly thought of, and it's like, oh, I loved him so much. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
anyway, I just thank you, John, for being willing to have these conversations
Hey,
because
no problem.
they are challenging things that we're facing, and there's
Yeah.
not easy answers. Like I said,
No.
we don't necessarily have the answers to these things, but if
Yeah.
we're afraid to talk about it or we're not willing to talk about it and
Right.
face it, then it's gonna go in a
It's just,
direction
yeah, yeah,
we
yeah. It's
don't
just
want.
gonna slip us by, and
Yeah.
it's not gonna be good for anybody, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
education is super important. I'm hoping that
Absolutely. Yeah.
after all this is done, we're gonna realize we've been defunding education to the point that we got here. And it's time that we start educating people so we never get back
Yeah.
here again. That is
Yes.
the underlying issue here. It's education. Like, we
Yeah.
are forgetting history. We're whitewashing the Holocaust and Nazism. And we're forgetting all these terrible things that have happened in the past that we don't have to relive if we can just try to remember them. And we are willfully forgetting. And it's time to wake up and stop forgetting. Stop pretending that things haven't happened in the past or that they weren't as bad. Like, time heals all wounds, unfortunately, right? There's a lot of
Sometimes,
there's a
yes.
lot of good points to time healing all wounds, and there's a lot of bad points to time healing all wounds. Time kind of just takes away the sting
Yeah.
of terrible, terrible reality.
Well, healing should not mean forgetting.
No, it should not. Yeah.
Because if you've forgotten it, have you actually healed? To heal is
Mm.
to have the memory, to have the knowledge, to weave
Have
it
the
into your
scars.
story, right?
Yeah.
To weave it in and move forward.
Yeah.
That to me is real healing.
Yeah.
So, but I'm with you. I was going to say in the United States, we're also trying to get rid of the education department. So,
Yes. Oh my Lord. I've read a lot recently about the things that are being cut, and
yeah.
independent inspector generals and have all
Oh,
been
yes.
fired.
Yeah.
Uh, there was a department that had a notice that managed to pop in my Google News feed, and what was it exactly? A bunch of investigations have just been shut down. Like,
Right. Yes. Well,
they're
much
not
like
allowed
that.
to investigate, and I think it was
Yeah.
financial related. Like, oh yes, it was the labor department. The labor department is no longer allowed to investigate anything, apparently.
So why have the department?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, that's the point, right? Let's
Yeah.
let's make them useless, and then let's get rid of them because, hey, look, they're useless.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. They're
yeah.
not efficient.
Well, all the conservative people with relatively difficult jobs might soon realize that Trump administration is not looking out for them.
Well, thank you again, John. I think we've kind of worn out the the topic of whether or not we have fascist tendencies.
Yes,
For
well, I
me,
think
the
we
answer is
we definitely do.
absolutely.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and I think we have
Yeah.
for a long time. And my views are probably what people would call extreme, but my views are extreme in a very round way. I'm extreme in every way. Like, I'm super for freedom. I'm super for taking care of each other. I'm super for education. Like, and
You
I'm
just sound like a
super
kind person, John. You
I'm
sound like a
super
good
against
person.
war. Well,
I'm,
I'm
I'm,
just
I'm with you. All of those things. I'm absolutely
exactly.
with you. So we might be a very one-sided program.
Yeah,
We're gonna have to
well,
find something we disagree
we're
on at some
spreading the good
point.
news. We're spreading
That's
the good
right.
news.
All right.
I'm
Well,
sure we'll
thank you
disagree on
again, John.
something.
Till next
Thank you.
time.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this content, please hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications.